Awesome. So there's a little bit of a delay. So that'll be good for us, but we are officially live. So thank you, Linda, for being here, and thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. This is the first kickoff event for our Sun Prairie Juneteenth programming, which is a week-long celebration of what Sun Prairie, his history with the Black community. This is a week-long celebration of the last people that were told about the emancipation of slavery, because it actually happened in January, and then it took that long to actually get down to Texas. So I think it's a really great, especially for right now and everything that's happening around the country and around the world, a really great restorative time to just focus in on the amazingness and beauty of the Black community around the world through this celebration. So thank you so much, Linda, for being here. I'm going to do a disclaimer. So our night is kind of a mix of a whole family experience. So with the kids, we'll be making our African masks out of construction paper. We have some stick-on beads, and this is all be recorded, so you can all do it with your families later. Glue sticks. I dropped off some supplies for people if you requested it earlier, so you should have those with you. And then we also, construction paper, glue sticks, the beads, and pencil. So that'll be easy. But we're going to intersperse that with some great wisdom that we have from Linda Vacunta here. And I will let her introduce herself.
You're so kind.
Yes, I'll eventually stop talking. But that'll be our night. And then we'll talk about stuff that's coming up for people to get invested in. So Linda, please take it away. Share with us who you are and how you got to be where you are. I think that's such an interesting book.
Well, hello, everybody. It's a great pleasure and an honor to be with you all. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. It's great to be in community during this time. I just want to start by saying Black is joy. Joy is resistance. So during this time when you're feeling like the system is crumbling on you, remember to keep your joy and to keep your spirit up, because that's how we survive through this. And then we're going to thrive, right? After surviving, we're going to thrive. And we have to speak positivity to ourselves and to our community. That's very, very important. Always speak positivity to yourself, to your kids, to your spouse, to whoever, your friends, the power of the word. So I am Dr. Linda Vacunta. I am a Cameroonian American, which means I was born in Cameroon, West Africa, and I came here at the age of 15. I lived up in Appleton, which is like 3 hours from here. Then I came to Madison and went to West High School. And then I spent 10 years at UW-Madison. I did my bachelor's, my master's, and then my PhD. So I guess I like school a lot.
And how, though?
But currently I am one of the deputy mayors for the city of Madison. And a lot of folks have not heard of the deputy mayor before. So the deputy mayors basically work with the mayor, and we just make sure that the office is running and that we are fostering or pushing.
That's all, just running.
Are we still on? We are. Okay. So we basically make sure that we're pushing the mayor's agenda forward. That's what our role is. And of course, we make sure that we are connecting with the community, listening to what the community wants and has to say, and making sure that we're bringing that back to our office and to our work. The other fun side of me, so while I'm not a professional artist, I used to dance very vigorously when I was in college. So I still think I'm a great dancer. When I had time, I would write poetry, and my father helped me get some of them published. But these days I don't have time as much anymore. I also like to write film scripts. So yeah, I also hosted a radio show for 10 years. So my radio name is DJ Linda.
So you found time for all of that. How? So one other disclaimer is that Linda and I almost kind of grew up together.
Yes.
Her father was an advisor for my mom when she was getting her PhD studying African language and literature.
Yes.
So I feel very under accomplished.
Oh, don't, please.
And I want to point out what I was saying earlier is, I think deputy mayors are doing so much, and to say that you're just making sure that the office runs is kind of a misnomer. I think, everything that we see in that community engagement, like you said, is through you all. So I think that's really exciting. So one thing I want to read before we get started. So I want to clarify, my name is Ruben Sanon. I'm the diversity strategist for the city of Sun Prairie, and I've been in the role since November. But Sun Prairie's work around diversity, equity, inclusion has gone on before me. We've been doing things before this Juneteenth event, before the Restore the Right to Breathe campaign this is part of. So I want to start this event off by reading our own diversity, equity, inclusion commitment statement to kind of put into context what our goals are. So Sun Prairie is committed to advancing equity, honoring a diverse identity, and creating an inclusive culture. These serve as our guiding principles every day in all that we do. Keep us accountable to this mission and join us in this commitment to a thriving Sun Prairie as you live, work, and play. So that's kind of the context where we're starting with. This is a long process. It took, 400 plus years to get to this point. And so I really want to be clear that a few workshops and trainings are not going to get us into the future that we all need and are working towards, but it's going to be slow incremental work, and I'm excited to have you as part of that today. So we got that great intro from you. And before I dive into what the first step of this African mask, I want to ask you a question. Can you reflect a little bit on why it's so important when we talk about Blackness in the United States and Blackness around the world, why it's so important to think about Africa? Because I think a lot of times Blackness in the US is defined starting at slavery, and it just didn't exist in the world before that. We learn about ancient Greek cultures and barbarians, but we never, but Black people begin in 1776 or something like that. So I want to hear your reflections on that.
Yeah, that's a very important question. For me, that to understand your history beyond slavery is to know who you are. So when I think about, so I always think about Black people in the United States as my distant relatives. Because truly, there were people who were taken from families. So those families are still back there. So there have been a lot of African Americans who've been tracing their ancestries, right? Oprah. And one person that I love to bring up is Blair Underwood, because his village, he traced his right to his village, which is like 2 villages away from my village where I lived. So he went there and he met his long lost family, right? And just the culture, like even the outfit that we put on, it's beautiful, it's gorgeous, So I think to know your history beyond slavery is to know who you are. And the other thing that I like to always try to speak to African Americans to remember that, or to know their history, is because it was the strongest of the strongest that were captured and brought here.
Yes.
Right? So we've been, or African Americans have been in this system that kind of suppresses you and makes you feel, I don't know, small or whatever. But if you remember that weak people were not captured, then you will know that you come from strength, and that a lot of people died on the boat here, and only the strongest again survived.
True.
So I think it's just important to remember that, and again to know that you came from very powerful kingdoms, right? I know we don't learn about the African kingdoms, but there was huge civilizations in Africa before the Europeans came and colonized countries in Africa. There's a lot of richness. There's a lot of things that were borrowed from the African cultures and taken globally. But we don't teach that. So to learn those things, really, you almost have to dig and dig and dig and get some books that are not really widely published. But anyway, so I say all of this to say, be a proud people. You are strong, you are smart. You truly, when people say you come from queens and kings, you truly come from queens and kings. It's not fabricated.
Mhm.
Okay, your people came from royalty, right? So I think it's important to know that history. And on the other pieces, I feel that sometimes we talk about Africa as this far away thing,
Mhm.
but think of Africa just like you think of China, just like you think of, I don't know, South America
Mhm.
or Japan, or it's just another continent that has lots of diversity. I mean, it has its challenges. I don't want to romanticize it for you. It has its challenges, but it has diversity. It has beauty. It's the continent that has the highest natural resources today.
Wow.
That's why everybody is going to Africa. America is going there. That's why they went there years ago, because there were a lot of natural resources. And it's still the only continent with all types of natural resources. So, and I know that what sometimes what you see on TV is very small. They show you just a small version of what Africa is. But it is a beautiful continent that has a struggle. But believe me, the young people are striving. They are fighting to make the continent better. So I just want to encourage people to learn more. Now everybody's on social media. Check out Instagram, Facebook. You will see some people that are living fabulous
Yeah.
lives, to be honest. Fabulous. I have friends who came to school here and they're back home. They're back in Nigeria, they're back in Ghana. And to be honest, they're living great lives. So I just think it's important to know that, and to know that while Africa is painted as this backwards place, it's not true, right? It's just as where the US is right now. If someone came from Africa and started living in the US and all they saw was 2020 moving forward, they would say, oh my goodness, America is a horrible place. What a nasty place.
Yeah.
But if you read the history of America, you will know that it was good at some point and things have just gone down now. So it's the same way you think about Africa. It wasn't always whatever we paint it to be. There was greatness, and it would rise again. Africa will rise again, just as America will rise again. So think of Africa in the context of how you almost see the America. You know, it's just another place that is growing, that is thriving, and that can share a lot with the world and with you, because that's where your ancestors are from.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm going to keep talking about that, but I want to put something in there for the kiddos. So, kiddos, if you want to trace your outline of your mass, we're going to get started on that and start cutting that out. But I wanted to point out, Linda, that we're so lucky that you and I got to grow up with this knowledge constantly around us and with this
Mhm.
appreciation. Like I said, my mother was getting her PhD in African languages and literature. I think your father was a professor in that,
French
um,
literature.
yeah, French literature and Francophone literature. Um,
Mhm.
so that's kind of where that overlap came. But so many people don't get exposed to this stuff. And so, as much as you can bring your young ones into this conversation, I really encourage people to do that. And we also know that, white supremacy and Eurocentrism are dependent on these myths that everybody else is suffering. It was really interesting when I was growing up. So I got to live in Africa a couple of times, and I lived in Benin and I lived in Ghana, which are both in West Africa. And people would, have these wild ideas of dirt roads and things. And yeah, there were dirt roads and there were highways. And just like the United States, I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan. There are dirt roads and there are highways, it's everywhere. And so not making this monolith. Another thing I want to point out, something that you mentioned, was how Africa is split up now. The kingdoms that existed there were cultural kingdoms. They weren't these borders that were outlined the way that they are now. And so, could you tell us a little bit about what it's like? Um, do you know, when you were working there, if you knew, did children learn about it in the ways of cultural borders and cultural understanding, or was it more in this Eurocentric, now modern borders and um, language barriers?
Yeah. So right now we learn about it mostly in the Eurocentric way of understanding. When I was growing up in Cameroon, I spent my first 15 years in Cameroon. There were some lessons, right, where we learned about the Songhai Empire, the Mali Empire. Um, but I feel like a lot of it was spent understanding Africa after it was split, uh,
Hmm.
after the scramble for Africa.
Yes.
And for folks who don't understand it, what we're talking about, so right now we have 54 countries, or was it 55 now? Um, but a lot of those, a lot of the geographical borders was divided by Belgium, France, and the British. They came and carved areas and called it Nigeria, carved this and called it Ghana. So that's not really how Africa was originally set up. Africa was more like big empires
Mhm.
that span across many of the countries right now. Um, so
And
I
they
would,
would even split it where it was just like a river, right? Because that's France wanted that river, and so the whole country got surrounded by this one resource, and so it's not
right.
based on the people at all.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It really wasn't based on the people. Yeah. It was based on what resources they wanted and how they chose to split that up.
Mhm.
And so, unfortunately, um, the education doesn't really focus. I say I call it pre-colonial. Doesn't focus a lot on the pre-colonial history of Africa. So even in Africa, we have to restructure um, the education because it's very tied to our identity. It's really
Mhm.
important. So when I travel, I like to go to schools and talk to kids. And most often, I like to say, "Do you know your neighbor? Like, what is name the countries around you?" And sometimes, even in secondary school, which is like middle school, some kids don't know
Mhm.
your neighboring countries. So I think it's really important because that's important for political stability. It's important for economic movement and integration within the continent,
Wow.
right? So if you don't know your neighbor and what they have, then you're buying stuff from like Europe. We're constantly buying
Mhm.
from Holland and France and all of that. Whereas there are people in Kenya that have what you need, right? So it's
Yeah.
really important to know your neighbor and what they have so that the money can circulate
Mhm.
um, within yourself first. Not that it can go out, but
Yeah.
making sure that it circulates first so that it serves you best.
Yeah,
Um,
all that wealth you were talking about,
yeah,
all those
yeah, the
natural
wealth.
resources.
Yeah,
Yeah.
building the wealth. Yeah.
And I noticed that we definitely always used to tend to talk about, African cuisine or African styles. And you, like you said, we have Holland stuff, and we have French stuff and German stuff. And we
Mhm.
break down Europe in such a meticulous way. And even we break down the United States between East Coast, Midwest,
Mhm.
Wisconsinite, we understand it such a micro level here. And
Yeah.
when we make a monolith out of other people, I think that's
Yes.
Eurocentrism right in itself.
Very much. Yeah. Definitely. Like I said, there are about 54 countries. So all the little ones watching, that's your challenge. Go look at the map of Africa, and start learning the names of the countries. And then after you learn, go on Wikipedia and start reading some more what is in each country.
Yeah.
The continent has so many languages. I don't even know how many languages Africa has now. Thousands, really. Um, right? And there are different for someone like myself that loves music. There are different types of music, different types of sound. When you go from from north to south or from east to west, right? So there's the way of dressing, right? The type of food is different from um, Nigeria in the west to Ethiopia in the east. So I mean, we do ourselves a disservice when we don't highlight the diversity because it's absolutely beautiful, right? So, yeah.
Definitely. Well, might do a little disservice because this is my outline right now. So I wanted to make sure that everybody's doing that. And then the next thing you're going to be encouraged to do is with your other construction paper pieces. African masks tend to be very geometrical and very sharp edges. So start cutting out some sharp edge pieces, and we'll use that for decorating our mask in a few minutes. So here are some examples of what I cut out. Um, and we'll return to that in a few minutes. So take the next few minutes to start cutting those out. I'm loving getting to chat with you. Like I said, I got to live in West Africa for a little bit, but I was pretty young. I was in high school.
Mhm.
Interesting thing about African countries is that they have their colonial language as a national language. But then, like you said, there's so many languages in there, and
Mhm.
not everybody speaks the colonial language. Not everybody speaks all the languages. And so when I was there, I was trying to learn French on top of Fongbe, on top of Yoruba, and so
Mhm.
it's a barrier. And so I would encourage people who want to learn more about Africa, start learning those languages, and that'll be a key kind of
Mhm.
to understanding the continent better and getting to know people. And that's the best way to kind of know a place. And then
And-
there's so many resources here in Madison, the African Association.
Yep.
Do you want to do you know anything about the African Association?
Oh yes. Since I kind of grew up here, I was involved when I was in high school, and I'm still kind of involved now. I kind of help support different things. But their biggest event is Africa Fest, which they put on every summer. I don't think that's going to happen this summer because of COVID, but that's usually a very nice event. You just get to see people from all over, food, different vendors, outfits, right? And now I'm seeing a lot more people here in the US are wearing the African fabrics. So if you want to
Yeah.
buy some, they're there. Um, but yeah, the organization is here and they're trying to be active. So yeah.
Yeah, great resource for people trying to learn more about the community right here in the Madison area. So let's move on to one of my next questions. So could you tell us what countries and or cities in Africa that you've lived in, and let's say for like a 6 month period, because I know your work history, I was kind of trying to follow it, and you've been everywhere. Um, and then could you kind of talk about when you're talking about them, what brought you there, and what were some defining characteristics? How did you know that you were in a different place when you were going between these different countries?
Hmm, that's interesting. So the places that I've lived in 6 months and more would be Cameroon and Sierra Leone.
Okay.
Cameroon because that's where I was born. Um, the main characteristics for Cameroon is that it's bilingual. It's a bilingual country. The official languages
Okay.
is
Yes. Yes.
English and French,
Yes.
because we have about 250 other languages um, in the country. And then there's a lingua franca, basically some kind of like a language that everybody speaks in a way, and it's called Pidgin.
Mm-hmm.
Pidgin is like broken English mixed with French, mixed with German. It's a result
It'll
of,
get you somewhere.
yeah, like everything.
Someone will understand you.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we have the two languages, English and French, and then we have the Pidgin.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would say that's a big characteristics of Cameroon. The other characteristics of Cameroon, I think, is the food. I think we have so much diversity in our food. Um, and then if you went to Cameroon, you'll probably hear makossa. If it is it's a musical genre. Um, and a lot of people have sampled makossa artists over the years, including Michael Jackson, who was sued by the Cameroonian artist because he didn't really credit the artist properly.
Good.
But the song Mama 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 Kosa Mama Mama
Ah.
Mama Kosa, that's from Cameroon. Um, and then the other country that I've lived in for 6 months and more is Sierra Leone. What's the distinguishing factor?
And what were you doing there?
I was running an NGO. I was the executive director for an NGO for 10 years. And we worked with K to 12 students, basically providing scholarships and educational support and running an after school program. I ran a global health field course with UW. So I would bring UW students from here to Sierra Leone. I also worked on an Ebola research project while I was there at some point. So I've done many things in Sierra Leone. I would say the distinguishing characteristics for Sierra Leone is the people are very friendly. They're just so nice. Like if your car breaks down, you would have like 6 people there to help you, right?
And they invite you in to eat first, and
Yes.
yes.
So they're just a really, really friendly people. Their food is very unique. They have like what we call cassava leaves.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what cassava is called here, manioc. I think is what it's called here.
Yeah, I know those words too. I'm not sure what else we call them. Yeah.
Yeah, so the food is very
Like a yam, sort of like a hard, drier yam.
yes, yes, yeah, it is like a yam. And you make many different things out of it, like gari, bobolo, mignondo, wata fufu.
Mm.
It's a nice it's one root that you can make so many different things out of it.
Oh.
The other thing about Sierra Leoneans is they like to party. Right? You know, they like to have fun. Um, um, some of the other countries that I've visited that I really like, I haven't stayed there as long, but I love Ghana. Everybody's talking about the capital these days, Accra. The capital of Ghana is Accra. Um,
A lot of people call Ghana the gateway to Africa for
yeah,
Americans.
that is true. Like for last year, the year of the return, so many African Americans went to Ghana, kind of to trace their roots and to understand where their ancestors came from. But I think it was the gateway to Africa because Ghana is just like a super welcoming, I think, country. It's had a lot of political stability. There is some economic growth. And they have infrastructures in place, I think, to welcome you know, visitors and stuff like that. So I know there was a time when you could get a visa when you land. I don't know if that's the case, but you know, one time when I was going to Ghana, I just got my visa. Landed right there. But yeah, I just love, I love Ghana. The vibe is just nice. I don't know. Like
when were you last there?
I was there in 2018? Wait, what was it? 2018 or 2017, but I was there in 2010 doing an internship with USAID. So that was really cool. The one thing that I would have to say that I note that is peculiar about Ghana is their sense of fashion. Like they have like just really nice tailors and nice styles. So yeah, I made a lot of clothes when I was there. I did my hair. I like the way they do their hair. The braids is very clean. It's really nice.
And Ghana's named after the Ga people, correct?
Sorry?
Ghana's named after the Ga people?
I'm not sure, actually. I'm not sure. After the Gang people. Yeah. I'm not sure if that's where it came from. I wonder. I'll have to look.
Yeah, I got to live there for 6 months when I was in 3rd grade in 2000. So very different time in 2018. Didn't learn Twi, didn't learn Ga.
Yeah, I tried to learn Twi. All I can say is Medasi.
Okay, what does that mean?
Thank you.
Oh, good word to know.
Medasi.
Yeah, always know how to say hello, bathroom, and thank you.
Oh yeah. You also say Akwaba, which is welcome. Akwaba.
Okay, Akwaba. Great. So I just want to show everybody. This is getting bright. This is how far I am on my mask, and I just wanted to give you time to start putting those on. I have some other things that I cut out as well, but I decided not to put them on. But we can use that in a few minutes. So you'd mentioned something working in the NGO space, and I really, think you have such a unique perspective. I know when I used to work at the Mortgage Center at UW-Madison, you came in to speak part of the time, and we had somebody talking from, I believe it's the Bank of Africa. Do you remember when you were there for that?
I think, did I just interrupt a meeting?
You were a sudden blessing. It was great to have the deputy mayor walk in and share your wisdom. But, it's such an interesting space, and especially as we're thinking about how do we have real equity in all the, Madison is such a strong nonprofit sector, but we still see these inequities and we still see these really deep-seated racism happen. Even in that NGO space. So could you talk a little bit about what the NGO space is like when you were working in Africa and what it's kind of compared to now that you're working in Madison area? So my specific question were, what are some parallels that you see in NGO work? And that means non-governmental organization for anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about, in parts of Africa that you lived. And when you compare that to the US, what are similarities and what do these similarities and these differences kind of reveal for you about values in those two different environments?
Well, perhaps I should start with the good things.
Yeah.
Well, the people who do NGO work really care because NGO work doesn't pay as much.
Yes.
So
It
that's,
asks a lot of you. Yeah.
yes, and it demands a lot from you. So I would say, for the most part, whether I'm on the continent or whether I'm here, people who work with NGOs really, really care. Um, for the most part, it's really about the people, right? So they're out in the community, engaging people, and all of that.
And that's great
Um,
because I feel like a lot of our young people don't realize that's a big skill, is just to be able to talk to people and engage with them. That's, I think, a growing skill.
it is a big skill. It is an important skill, right? Like to ask the right questions when you're out there and to ask questions in a way that you get real answers, not
Yeah.
answers that people think you want to hear. And so, in a lot of ways, you have to enter the spaces with humility. That's one thing that I feel that is important in Africa and here. Um, for example, even though I have a doctorate, I used it very carefully when I'm on the continent and when I'm here, because for some people, it can come off like you're all the way up there, like you're not relatable, right? So, I mean, people knew that I was doctor, and they would call me Dr. Linda, but I was very conscious about how I used it so that I didn't alienate people or so that I didn't force people to 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 be something that was not them,
Yeah.
right? So when I did my NGO work in Sierra Leone, even though I speak Pidgin, they have their own version of Pidgin, which is slightly different. So I tried really hard to learn that quickly. It's called Creole.
Mm.
So I try to learn Creole very quickly so that when I'm doing my work, I'm really able to relate to the people and they feel comfortable with my work. So I thought that that's really important. And that's the same here, right? If you're doing work, whether it's in the Latino community or in the Black community, you have to be very much aware of how you enter that space. You have to remember that people are experts in what they need, right? You're
Exactly.
just there to facilitate, you're just there to help, but they're really experts in their own experiences, and it's important to respect that.
Could we
So,
dive deeper into that part too? Because I think a lot of people right now are saying, what do I do with COVID-19, with the Black Lives Matter protests? I want to do something. And,
mhm,
what I say to people is it's a good time to listen, but how do you become that agent of change while simultaneously being that, I don't want to say passive because we want to be anti-racist, we want to be active in this work.
mhm.
But how do you balance that?
So how do you balance?
Or how are you aware of what you're bringing with you if you've never been challenged with that before?
Mm, well, I suppose you have to do some self-reflection, and someone has to challenge that, right? Because if nobody ever challenges you and then you don't even know, that's just a thing.
Yeah.
So first of all, you have to be aware, and you do that by educating yourself. You can read books. These days you can watch videos, you can listen to podcasts. Let's say like right now during this Black Lives Movement thing, and white folks really want to help. Well, read some books on white privilege and what that means, and then reflect on your own life. I'm someone who I reflect on my life like daily. After I get off work, I'm going to reflect about this interview. What did I say? Should I have said something another way? Do you know what I mean? So when you do that self-reflection, then you identify places where you were right and places where you can improve, right? I'm not saying you were wrong, but you can improve. Um, and then, just have some people that can hold you accountable. Get some friends. You can never do this work in isolation. So that's really, really important. Have discussions among your group, and don't go and ask your Black friend. Don't do that because Black folks are tired right now.
Yes.
But find some friends who you think have done that work, and have those discussions with them. And I'm not saying deny yourself when you're going into a community, because if you do that, it almost comes off pretentious, right? You're not going to go in and pretend that you're not white. Or for me, I'm not going to go in and pretend that I'm not highly educated. I'm just going to be aware of how I present myself as a highly educated person. And I put that in quote because in my travel globally, those who did not step a foot, some people who did not step a foot in the classroom are so smart. Like if they had stepped foot in class, they would have a PhD in
Yes.
whatever they're so good at, right? So again, to me, it's entering with humility and listening deeply, right? And then if you're not sure if you're hearing, speak it back, paraphrase, and say, hey, is this what you're saying? I just want to make sure I have it correctly. Um, but just like make sure you're listening and make sure that you're checking so that you don't have your own interpretation, because it's very easy to listen and then have your own interpretation of what people said. So
Mhm.
it's nice to always check back in, and respect people, respect what people say to you. If they ask you to be confidential about stuff, keep it confidential, right? I've heard of researchers who've gone into spaces and people have told them, I don't want you to publish this, and then they go ahead and publish it, right? That's not respecting,
Trust
like,
lost. Yeah.
yeah, you've lost trust.
Mhm.
um like, be a stable person, so don't just come, grab and get out, because people will not trust you. Like, show them that you're really there to care. If you truly care, if you don't care, well, don't be there. All right,
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
stay in your corner. um that's why I've actually worked in Sierra Leone for 10 years, because I feel like when you truly care, you can't just leave the work like that. And now, even though I'm not working in Sierra Leone, I still stay engaged in different ways. So people still know that, hey, Linda is busy with being a deputy mayor, but it doesn't mean that she doesn't care about the work that we're doing over there. So, like,
Yeah.
pick a subject area, or I don't know, something that you're passionate about, that you can see through over the long haul. Don't just be like a short term kind of person. It doesn't look good. Um,
Yeah.
okay, let's talk about the negative parallels.
Mhm. Yep.
So I'll just point just a few. When it comes to NGO work, it's important that we talk about diversity, but let's really have diversity. It's really important, right? So um, if you're working with African Americans, what does your staff look like? And don't just have one person, because that puts a burden on that person. Truly have significant diversity in your group. And it's the same thing actually on the continent sometimes, right? So they have, they would recruit people at low level where they pay them very little money. And all the higher ups are white folks that get a lot of the big bucks. So, and we see that a lot still on the continent. And it's sometimes it's a bit disturbing, to be quite honest. So make sure that your organization represents the community to a certain level that you're hoping to serve. Um, the other side is sometimes I think people come with like pre-packaged programs of what works for a community. I see that a lot in Africa, and I see that a lot sometimes here, right? You feel like, oh, maybe they're in the project or they're in the ghetto. This is what they will need.
Mhm.
And sometimes I'm reminded of the story of that. I think I heard it on NPR, of some lady. I think she's Caucasian. She was working in Afghanistan, and they've had like conflict for a while. And she, in her head, she thought that these women would need, like, she wanted to bring them supplies, and she thought they would ask for, like, I don't know, Band-Aid, whatever. But then she she decided to ask them, what would you like me to bring for you? And they said nail polish
Mm.
and lipstick, right? Because it's been a while since they've truly felt beautiful.
Yeah. Some humanizing stuff and not that tactile
Right.
solve a problem stuff all the time.
Yeah. So yeah, they don't want to be like, oh, it's issue. Something they just want to feel good and live a good life and laugh and dance and all of that. So all of that to say, it's always important to listen to folks and what they need. So sometimes I see that in the NGO work, both here um and in Africa. The other thing is funding. I feel like again, NGO work both in Africa and here is not funded really well.
Mhm.
But that's really the crux of our society.
Yeah.
It's important that that the list of us does well, that the list of us is living and thriving.
Mhm.
And to do that, we need to be boots on the ground. And to do that, we need to pay people well. So
Yeah.
this is for funders, right? Don't pay social workers 50,000 a year in this economy. No, pay them well, because I'm telling you, folks are calling them at night right? Their work doesn't go 9 to 5.
Mhm.
It is like 24 hours. When I was a social worker, so I know I had an emergency phone and I always had to have it on,
Mm.
right? Because I work with individuals who experience human trafficking, sexual trafficking.
Wow.
And so I always made sure that I had my phone on in case my client needed anything, whether it's 3 a.m. or 2 a.m.
Mhm.
So folks in those NGO positions are doing really hard work and they're working around the clock. And I see that in both Africa and here, we don't fund those people. We don't take care of those people really well. So,
Mhm.
so those are some of the things that I
Yeah.
notice.
Yeah. Incredibly emotionally taxing work.
Very
And I think sometimes we undervalue that and we push it kind of to young people and say, oh, young people will, take on all this burden and then they'll leave. And
yes,
that just creates this system
yes,
where you have people who aren't as well trained
yep,
or people are burning out or all
yep,
these different problems.
yeah.
And
Okay.
especially as we ask people of color to take those positions,
Yeah,
to fill these expectations of diversity at
yeah,
these very low levels, like you talked about, you're burning them out even more because they're
yep,
dealing with all the real world stuff and
mhm,
the real world stuff of these people that now they're serving. So
yep, yeah.
that's really
So
important.
very on point.
Well, so I'm getting close to the end of my mask, so I wanted to show this to people. So I got pretty creative. I still need to cut out eyes and a mouth, so I'll be doing that. But I'd love to see people's masks on our Facebook after you're done with them for next week.
That looks really gorgeous. Wow.
Thank you. It's all just shininess and no
That's
substance.
what makes it good.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, So, thinking about your experiences here, because I think you have such a unique perspective. So much of your youth was spent in, remind me, not Sierra Leone,
Cameroon.
Cameroon. I'm mixing them up in my head. And then so much of your youth was spent in Appleton, which I've never been to Appleton. I don't know if I could point to it on a map. No shade to Appleton, love it. Um, but thinking about places that have Black people in Wisconsin, you don't think Appleton. Maybe it's not
Yeah.
true. I know Appleton has the longest diversity strategist, actually, person in my role of the entire state. So
Mhm.
a lot of misconceptions there. But could you talk about how Blackness is kind of defined differently when you're in Africa than it is when you're here? And thinking about Blackness and then also issues of privilege, how do they work when you're there? Because I think we're pretty aware of privileges and how they exist here, but I think there are a lot of along lines that we understand. And so, could you talk
Yeah.
about how they exist there and how they're being addressed? So,
Mhm.
Blackness in both spaces, and then privilege in both spaces.
So clearly, when I was growing up, everybody around me was Black. So I mean, maybe there was more colorism, right? Where it's like, oh, this person's light skin and you're dark skin.
Mhm.
But I was just, I was Linda.
Yes.
Right? So I didn't really think about like being Black. Well, maybe sometimes we would have nuns who would come to our school and they'll be like, oh, that white person, oh, that white guy,
Mm.
that white nun. Um, so yeah, growing up in Cameroon, I really didn't have to think about that. Perhaps, so the privilege I would say that I had was, or I would say education, right? I was able to go to school when there are many kids that weren't able to.
Mhm.
I would say maybe economically, even though there was a point in my life where we were very poor, but to a certain degree, we were economically okay, right? My dad worked at the presidency in the country. We lived in a nice neighborhood. So economically, we were good. We had access to certain things. Yeah. So I would say over there, my privilege, and I would also say like being able-bodied, right?
Mm.
Is another privilege because there are folks who um, are not like able-bodied and they have certain challenges. They can't access certain things.
Mhm.
Um, so, but then coming here and coming to Appleton, right now Appleton is a bit more diverse.
Mhm.
But when we came in, it wasn't as diverse. So I was the only Black girl in my private school for a while. And then I was told there was one other Black guy, but I didn't see
You were
him.
told, go find them.
Yeah, I didn't see him maybe for a few months, maybe. And so when I saw him, I yelled at him. I was like, "Where have you been?" Um, but yeah, so when I came here, I was absolutely reminded of my blackness. Um, and and I would say at the time, some of my classmates were not. A lot of people were helpful, right? They just wanted to make you feel comfortable,
Mhm,
but some were very uneducated,
mhm,
borderline, a bit ignorant about some
mhm.
things, right? For example, there was someone who told me that we sleep in trees, and I said, no, I just came from Africa two
He
months
told you.
Yes, yes. And he actually got into an argument with me because I
Mm,
said, no, I just came from Africa 2 months ago and I was not sleeping on a tree.
yeah.
And he said, well, I saw it on National Geographic. And I was like,
Mm,
okay, well, I'm an African who just came from Africa. I'm telling you,
yes.
right, that I just came from there. And people make comments like, oh, do you have an elephant as a pet? I'm like, no,
Mm.
honey. I only saw an elephant for the first time when I came to the US at a zoo. Okay.
You have elephants here.
Right,
I
you
did not
have
have a.
elephants here. So anyway, so there were just those things that remind you of your blackness or your
Mhm,
Africanness.
mhm.
Um,
And how do we, as Blackness is, for young people that, may have those conversations in very white spaces, how did you find the strength and confidence to say no? That's not true.
well, so I was just very persistent, right? Because I was educated,
Mm-hmm.
right? Well, let me not use educated. I was knowledgeable.
Knowledge, yes.
I was knowledgeable and I was firm
Mm-hmm.
in my knowledge,
Yeah.
right? So you're not going to come and override me over
Mm-hmm.
what I know. So part of it was confidence,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's why I always say I want African Americans to know more about Africa,
Mm-hmm.
because when a continent has been painted as backwards, poor, and whatever, it kind of gives you low self-esteem in yourself, like, ooh, those are my ancestors. They're all
Mm-hmm.
of that.
Yeah.
But that's not what your ancestors are. They are
Mm-hmm.
creators, they are innovators, they're doing well. Yes, there are challenges, just like we have challenges in America, but it's just like another place. So I was very confident and knowledgeable, and I wasn't going to back down on what I knew. Um, Also, I was just very proud, right? And as I've read history, the first humans came from Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So all of you guys, or at least the majority of you guys, came from the Black person, from the Black woman,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I take pride in that,
Yes.
right? So the Black woman can give birth to someone with less melanin,
Mm-hmm.
but someone with less melanin cannot give birth to, I guess, anyway. You
Yeah.
know what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
We are the origin. We're
Mm-hmm.
the origin of the human race as we know it now. Maybe that will change in a few years, but that's what we know it right now. So
Mm-hmm.
I take pride in that.
Yeah.
Not in like, oh, I'm better than you, but like, wow, okay.
The possibilities are endless.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so I think like equipping yourself with knowledge
Mm-hmm.
is important to give you confidence
Yeah.
to to I guess knock down any stereotypes or whatever that people bring your way.
Yeah. And I think what's one thing that I heard in your story just now is, people were nice and they were ignorant. And I think, especially in the Midwest and Wisconsin,
Mhm.
people equate being nice with good enough, right?
Yes.
Oh, I waved and now they must feel welcome, right?
Mhm.
There's but you have to be so active in that,
Mhm.
because there are so many things flying at Black people all the time that make us feel unwelcome.
Yes.
That you have to be so active in that, and it's
Yes.
not good. It's a lot more work.
Yeah.
It's
And then
and
the
it's.
other thing, honestly,
Mhm,
as I experienced blackness here, especially in the Midwest,
mhm.
is I began to encourage other white people to also learn about where they came from. Because the
Yes.
one way that people in Wisconsin other you is to
Mhm.
say, oh, where's your accent from?
Mm,
Well, where are you from? Right. And at first I didn't have a problem answering that.
yeah.
But as I learned the history of America, I realized that we're all immigrants here.
Mm,
And so now when you ask me, I answer. But I also ask you,
mhm.
where are you from? I'm from Fond du Lac. Where's your grandparents from? They're from Fond du Lac. Where are your great grandparents from? They're from Germany. Do you
Mm-hmm.
practice any German cultural stuff? Have you
Mm-hmm.
ever been to Germany? you know,
Yeah.
so um, so I guess in a way, why my blackness, I don't know, maybe people used it to other me, but
Mm-hmm.
I use when that happens, I use it to make it more inclusive to say,
Mm-hmm.
don't other me
Yeah.
because we're all coming from somewhere. And
Yeah.
perhaps you've forgotten, and perhaps nobody ever taught you that. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to remind you so that you know that we're all in this together, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. For sure.
yeah. Anyway, so
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's so interesting thinking about that othering because, I think even our Native American brothers and sisters get othered, even though they're not from anywhere else, and
Right.
so it isn't this inherent thing. And I think a lot of times people have a hard time understanding that these systems were built and they're not just natural, right? Where these ideas are reinforced all the time. I
Yes.
had this really interesting story when I was in high school. I had the privilege of go for my second time in my life skiing. I was in the Alps, and when you're there, it's not like Tyrol Basin up north. They have
Right.
like little police tape along the side of the mountain, and if you
Mm.
go past it, you fall off and die. I don't know.
Oh
They have
God.
less regulations there, and so these little kids grew up there, and they were skiing around me, um, and one of the little girls went to her mom, and she was speaking French, and I understood her, and she was confused because I kept falling down because I was so bad at skiing and so scared, and she said, "Why is he so dark, but he's so bad at skiing?" Because everybody when you ski, you get really dark on the mountain, and so she thought because I was a black person, she thought, oh, he must ski all the time. Why
Oh,
is he not able to ski? And it was so interesting seeing her context was I was just a person to
yeah.
her who
Yeah.
must have this talent
Yes.
because that's how she understood the world.
That's
And
what.
she had not learned about othering me in that way yet. And
Yeah,
so
that's so
understanding that
interesting.
this othering is so taught and we feel
Yes.
it's inherent at one point, but it's not, right?
Yeah. No, it is really thought.
Yeah.
And
So
that's
it's
why
just
we as adults need to be very conscious of how we talk, how we treat each other, because we think
mhm.
kids are not watching, but they really are watching.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Most of the stuff is learned through small interactions, through small
Mm-hmm.
physicalities that you have, and
Mm-hmm.
not blatantly said. And so I think,
Yeah.
as we invite ally families into this conversation, it's
Mm-hmm.
so important to be so purposeful about that.
Very, very. And don't think you're gonna tell your kids, "Oh, don't do that," and they will listen. You have to show them.
Exactly. You have to live it.
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah. Yeah. Most kids don't like vegetables because their parents don't eat vegetables. So it's not, we know this stuff is true. So,
Right.
um, So I have one last question. So I wanted to show everybody my final product. I cut
Oh,
out the eyes, put some jewels around it. This is my African mask for the day. Kids out there, you probably did a lot better than me. So I want to see those photos on
right.
our City of Sun Prairie Facebook as you create those. But my last question for you was, what would you say to someone who has always wanted to go to Africa but doesn't know where to begin that journey? And might it depend differently on what their identity is or um, what where they've been,
Mm-hmm.
as we think about next steps for people.
Yeah, next steps. I would say if you're here or wherever you are, begin to connect with the African community, right? Just learn. Again, there are 54 or 55 countries. Connect and learn, see what you like, because different countries have different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you like really spicy food, I would advise go to West Africa.
Yes.
Well, actually, that's a lie. East Africa has spicy food too, but less spicy food.
Okay. Okay.
But it's just good to like where you are, start making friends and learning about the different countries and what they have there. And they go online and like try and learn as much as possible, not just the top line things, because the top line things are going to be like,
Mm-hmm.
the backward stuff. Um, but I actually like to go on social media these days
Oh
to
goodness.
actually learn a little bit more about countries because young people
Oh,
are posting, right?
yes.
Young people are constantly posting pictures and videos and all of that. And it doesn't always make it on Google, I think,
Mm.
but like Instagram, Facebook, I don't know, TikTok now.
Okay.
I would also say watch movies. Watch movies made by African filmmakers and directors. I've had a couple of problems with Hollywood films because they just like fetishize things, and I don't know. but they're fantastic filmmakers. Nigeria, right? There's Nollywood. Um, they have also improved over the years. Ghana, they put out great movies. South Africa puts out great movies. So there are different ways of learning about the continent, so that you can begin to see, okay, this is what I vibe with. This is
Yeah.
the kind of thing I like. So, and then maybe from there, you could join, like, if you're a university student, you can join associations, right?
Mhm.
Like ASA, African Student Association, they have one at UW, they have one at MATC.
Mhm.
They have some in high schools. Join those associations if you're really, really passionate about it. And then there are people who take groups to Africa, right? So, for example, here in Madison, there's Maya and Manju. They take a group of folks who like dancing. They take them to Guinea Conakry. Um, and so there are people who travel together. But also there are some of us here who have linkages back home, so we can help facilitate that travel. So if you don't have a group, it's okay. Find someone like myself who has traveled extensively and has people on the ground and can help organize things for you over there. So those are some of the places I would say folks should start. And if you have further questions, feel free to email me on my Gmail. I don't mind answering questions.
Another sacrifice. I don't know how you do it. You're always, I think Linda sleeps in her office. So
Yeah, I am still in my office.
we need some good vacation time. Maybe we can go
Yes.
check out Ghana. I haven't been there in so long.
I love Ghana.
Eat our way through West Africa. I would love to do that.
I really want to go to Senegal
Me too.
because I love Youssou. I love their fashion.
I love jollof rice and
Yes, yes.
oh, that's what I
Yeah.
want.
So there's just so much. There's just so much to see on the continent, quite frankly.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yeah, and being really honest with yourself, I think a really big part of that too is that reflection that you talked about, and start thinking about how you might live differently if you were in a different context, right? How you live in this one space in the world, and there's so much more to explore.
There's a lot.
I think going to Europe is very normalized in
Mhm.
American culture, and you can eat pasta and get a baguette, and there's that times a million in the continent of Africa.
Oh,
And
there's
you
so
can still
much.
get great baguettes.
Yes. Oh, you get so much. And also that's one thing. There are a lot of Africans that cater now here. So if you want to try the African cuisine, there's Hawa and Delices. I think that's what her name is. But there are quite a few people who cater. If you want to learn how to cook, you can also hire her and have her come and teach you how to cook. There are things out there. You can start experiencing Africa right here in Madison.
Yeah, the stomach is a great gateway to any place. So I think that's a great idea. Well, thank you so much, Linda. I think we're gonna wrap up early tonight at 8 o'clock. But thank you so much for having us. It was amazing to talk through your story. I'm so happy that you're serving the city of Madison and the region, and glad to have you back. And to have known you growing up, I feel like I'm privileged in knowing that, and get to be like, oh, the Bakuntas are going to be on my show.
Yeah, you're special. You're special.
Yes, yeah. I'm calling in the family card.
Yes, you should use it. Thank you. This was really fun, and thank you, everyone. I hope your masks are just as beautiful as Ruben's.
Or better.
Or better.
And thank you for a great beginning of Juneteenth. Please check out the rest of our Juneteenth programming over the week. You can go to see the Plan to Restore the Right to Breathe at City of Sun Prairie /Civic Sun Prairie. And then on our Facebook, City of Sun Prairie's Facebook, you can see all the programming for this week. We're really excited to bring that to you, and then really use this month as some restorative healing time and some time to look forward. And so in the next 400 years, we are already doing this every single day and celebrating everybody that we bring in this wonderful community of ours. So I'm really excited to have done this with you, and have a great night, everybody.